Iran had to take an old oil tanker, about 30 years old, out of retirement and send this vessel to its oil island because it no longer has enough space to store oil. This Tuesday, April 28, 2026, this image carries more weight than any speech from Tehran. While the regime tries to say that it is still here, its oil is starting to get stuck, its tanks are reaching their limit, and its biggest source of money is turning into a threat against itself. The reactivated vessel reveals a crisis that the Iranian government cannot hide. A nation that is comfortable does not look for an old ship to serve as a storage facility at sea. This is done by those who are under pressure, who need to buy time, and who fear that the stagnant oil will reach the fields, the pipelines, and the refineries. Oil needs to circulate. When it doesn't go out to buyers, it accumulates. When it accumulates too much, production needs to decrease. If the decrease comes too late, the system can suffer serious damage. Karg Island has become the center of this pressure. That's where the most sensitive part of Iranian exports passes through. That's why sending an old oil tanker near that region is a warning sign. Tehran may call this a technical measure, but the real message is simple. There's a lack of space, no way out, and a lack of control. The regime that prides itself on defying Washington now has to improvise floating storage for the oil it can't sell at the usual pace. I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now, you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed, real-time information with the best journalistic quality you've ever seen. The benchmark for credibility, Milson Alves News. The blockade led by the United States has reached exactly this point. The American strategy doesn't need to bring everything down at once. It's enough to block the routes, monitor the ships, limit the oil exports, and let the pressure build up from within. Iran tried to use the Strait of Hormuz as a weapon of blackmail, threatening to control a vital passage for global trade. Washington's response was to tighten Tehran's financial spigot. That's the standoff right now. Iran wants to breathe first and negotiate later. Donald Trump wants concessions before easing the siege. While one side tries, the other uses time as a weapon, and the oil remains at a standstill. Each barrel without a destination becomes a cost. The fuller each tank gets, the greater the risk. Each ship prevented from continuing its journey reduces the revenue that sustains the regime, the Revolutionary Guard, and its armed allies in the region. The Iranian proposal shows the maneuver. Tehran wants to reopen Hormuz now and leave the nuclear issue for later. The regime is trying to separate the maritime crisis from the nuclear issue, as if they could ease the blockade without addressing the most important issue for the United States. Trump has already made it clear that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. That's why, when Tehran tries to push this debate off until later, it gives the impression that they're just trying to escape the pressure without delivering what really matters. The Iranian foreign minister visited Russia, Oman, and Pakistan in search of support, mediation, and a political solution, to show that he is not alone, that he still talks with Moscow, and that he still has open channels. But a diplomatic meeting doesn't empty an oil tank. A photo next to allies may help with propaganda, but it doesn't release a detained ship, doesn't open a blocked route, and doesn't solve the lack of storage space on cargo ships. Russia appears as a partner, but it doesn't remove the main burden. Moscow can send messages and advocate for negotiations, but Iran needs to sell oil, receive money, and keep the system running. The regime doesn't survive on rhetoric, it survives on cash, and that cash comes from oil. When exports stall, the pressure hits the budget, the security forces, allied groups, and the people's pockets. Inside Iran, the hardline sectors seem to be leading the response. The Revolutionary Guard and the military don't want to give in easily. For them, backing down on the nuclear issue may seem like a defeat. Because of this, they insist on resisting, even at a high cost. The logic is to endure the pain, wait for political pressure against Trump in the United States, and try to secure a weaker deal. But this gamble carries a huge risk. While Tehran waits for its opponent to tire, its own economy is losing oxygen. The regime can control television, arrest critics, and put armed men on the streets. It can keep repeating that it has won, that it has resisted, and that it is still standing, but it can't hide an oil crisis forever. When activity slows down, when workers are affected, when the currency loses value, and when prices go up, the propaganda starts to crack. The people hear the government talk about victory, but they feel it in their daily lives when the system is bleeding. Oil is more than just a commodity for Tehran. It is the engine of power, funds its internal apparatus, sustains external influence, finances allies, and allows the regime to confront its enemies. If this engine stalls, the crisis is no longer just commercial, it becomes a political threat. The regime loses money, room to maneuver, and the ability to impose its will. That's why the old reactivated oil tanker became a symbol. It shows that the pressure has moved beyond words and hit the regime's actual logistics. Tehran says it stands firm, but it looks for an aging vessel to store oil. It claims to control the situation, but it seeks out mediators. It claims strength, but tries to break the blockade without addressing the nuclear issue, repeatedly exposing the same problem. Iran wants to appear strong while trying to prevent the trapped oil from turning into a disaster. At sea, the small Iranian boats continue to serve as a propaganda tool. They can provoke, record encounters, and create tension. But they don't change the overall balance. The United States has a much superior naval force in the region and knows that the blockade carries more weight than any video of defiance. Iran can make noise, but the one who sets the pace of the crisis is the one who controls the oil flow. Israel also remains in the equation. If military operations resume, Tehran knows it could face new attacks against strategic facilities. The diplomatic pause doesn't seem like a gift to the regime, it seems like a last chance. If Iran uses this pause just to buy time, the response could come back even heavier, with American and Israeli forces ready to step up the pressure again. Tehran's mistake might be believing that Trump will accept any deal to end the tension. The regime is betting on political attrition, nervousness in the markets, and internal criticism in the United States. But easing the pressure before a real concession would be giving Iran exactly what it is looking for. That's why Washington keeps up the pressure and lets the clock run against Iran's economic structure. Now the crisis advances quietly, barrel by barrel. The lack of space to store oil becomes more important every day. If production needs to drop in a disorganized way, if the pipelines are pushed beyond their limits, and if fields are affected, the damage could last much longer than the current dispute. The explosion in this case is not just a strong image, it's the portrait of an economy that is starting to lose control over its greatest wealth. Tehran is trying to tell the world that it's still here, but standing doesn't mean winning. A regime can survive for some time and still be weakened from within. If oil stalls, if money dries up, and if infrastructure fails, survival becomes just waiting for the next blow. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Mills and Alves community.